tell the landlord not to have
us.
meetings. But I went along to this pub and said, and I booked this place, but because of my accent, I suppose, a year later, we had very, very large crowd. A year later, the lady, the publican, said to me, well, excuse me, why are so many people interested in anagrams? She told the police that these people were interested in anagrams. Clearly the police wasn't interested in solving. But
so
that was that. But then Philip sort of approached me and said, look, you got some journalistic experience and you have been freelancing, this, that and that. And we need somebody actually who can put that paper together because they're all stodgy long articles. Well, I didn't think they were stodgy long articles. I read them from cover to cover. But I got into Freedom, and nobody asked me if I knew anything about anarchism. What?
Well, you only had this in the anarchist paper.
That's good enough, isn't it? Yeah. And what I couldn't realize was why there were so many people squabbling in the anarchist movement. It's remarkable. I mean, some of them are still alive, who are still writing sort of these very difficult letters to the paper. But I just printed everything that people sent and went to Scotland and to Wales and other places and got the people who have been quarrelling themselves to contribute towards the paper. And I think that was probably the best, it was the best way to increase circulation because the Scottish anarchists had an issue each month and so on and so forth.
And
it went in rotation, yeah.
Did you get round to reading the holy texts of anarchism by then? Bakunin, Kropotkin, Malatesta, did you get stuck
Right,
into those?
well, I did try to read them. Kropotkin is readable.
And a forerunner of yours was editor of Freedom, wasn't he?
No, before, but look, I did read Proudhon. You need a really, I mean, they are all very difficult writers. Possibly the reason that anarchism never got anywhere is because all their writers are, with the exception of Kropotkin, who could write, and Malatesta, who could argue. Bakunin, I could never understand what he was talking about. But I find
this is a
that
terrible admission.
I'm sorry about that. I mean, basically one is in favour of Bakunin for what he says, but
if you could understand what it was.
If you understand every word, yeah. Very...
So did you, in terms of the ongoing feuds, did you ever get caught up in the epic long-running feud between Albert Meltzer and Vernon Richards, or did that pass
Well,
you
this
by?
is very difficult because Albert Meltzer was really a very able man, and he wanted to be the editor of Freedom. There's no doubt about it, to my mind. And he was very disappointed when Vernon, Vernon Richards, who practically retired, didn't ask him to do so. And I remember him approaching a lot of people to start another paper, and that's why he started Black Flag, because he just wanted his opinions to get through. What he couldn't do, he was in the wrong company there, I think, because they pushed him a little bit further than he wanted to go. Whereas if he were editing Freedom, he would have been an excellent editor, I think.
That's very interesting indeed, John. That's very interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah.
I mean, Freedom in the early 60s, I did find, was a bit stodgy. And then under your editorship, it seemed to lighten up a lot and have a lot more shorter, newsy bits. But the sea change must have come in the years 67, 68. I mean, 67, you had to have the Summer of Love and hippies. Then 68, you had the Student Revolution, the May events in France. And I noticed Freedom must have I think you upped the circulation from about 3,000 to 12,000.
Well, yes, and I took to task because it was in those places printed by letterpress. And there were only two people there. There was Dick Pugh, a master printer. He was a beautiful printer, and he put the lead letters into a chase and worked on it and printed the whole thing by hand. And there was Ben, who was helping to print, and I had to take the articles down to Stepney Green, where there was a typesetter there who would do it. But the point about letterpress was so important that it not only did it look good, the paper looked good, but because of the method of printing, we could beat the daily papers. I always left half a column empty for the latest bit of news that they didn't have time. So those that got the paper, we actually beat them journalistically.
Yeah, in a proper newspaper.
Yeah.
Did you, in sort of like I did in science, get caught up in the excitement of 1968 and think that there was radical change was possible?
Yes, radical change was possible. The only difficulty was that we had no contact really with the working class. The working class we approached through our own methods and what have you. We had a lot of people, trade unionists who worked for freedom, like Peter Turner and Bill Christopher, and they had a back page to themselves. But the thing was this, that where we put where the big crowds of anarchists suddenly came from were the universities and the sit-ins and the students and everything else. And it was before its time. I think now it's a much more... it would be more possible today to argue for anarchism to a larger public, because the groundwork was done by not just by freedom. Am I able to mention class war? I mean, class war was possibly the paper that the working people did read, and because of its liveliness and what have you, and less dogma.
In the 60s, there was a big rise in other underground papers, things like Oz and International Times, and you had Black Dwarf and Red Money.
Yes.
They suddenly shot out of the blues.
Yes,
did they sort of influence you?
Yes. In fact, International Times was the paper that completely confused the issue. It sounded as if they were interested in anarchism. I don't think they were. They at all. And